Biography of Sri Paramahansa Yogananda Guruji. Autobiography of a Yogi. Everyone should read this history. This book is very famous all over the world. It is an inspiration to many cricketers, actors, workers, businessmen. Everyone has changed their direction from this autobiography of a Yogi. Chapter 1, My Childhood with Mom and Dad. Chapter 1, My Parents and My Childhood. The search for the ultimate truth, and the accompanying guru-disciple relationship, have long been inherent in Indian culture. The path I followed led me to a divine sage. His glorious life was designed to stand as an example for many ages. He was one of the great sages who are the true treasures of India. Such great men have emerged in every generation, saving India from the fate that befell Egypt and Babylonia in ancient times. The earliest memories in my memory are filled with vague details of a previous life. I have vivid memories of living as a yogi in the snowy regions of the Himalayas in a very distant past. These flashes of past memories, through some unknown, picturesque connection, made the future visible to me in a playful way. I still remember the humiliation I felt due to my helplessness as a child. At that time, I recognized my inability to walk and the inability to express my feelings freely with anger. When I realized my physical disability, waves of prayer would rise in my heart. My deep emotions and feelings would express themselves in many languages within my mind. While I was in such a confusion of different languages, I gradually got used to listening to my parents' Bengali. The word Guru is limited to toys and toes. The 17th verse of the Guru Gita gives a suitable meaning to the word Guru as the dispeller of darkness. Gu equals darkness, Ru equals that which dispels. He is a practitioner of yoga, the ancient science of renunciation. Yoga means union. See chapter 26, Kriya Yoga Shastra. How vast the minds of children, as adults think, are. I have often cried and cried, the turmoil in my mind and the body not used to letting it go. These are the two reasons. I remember my family members being saddened by my suffering. But happy memories like my mother's caresses, my first attempts to walk or to make mistakes, etc., also linger in my mind. These early successes, which are usually forgotten, are the natural foundations of self-confidence. It is not for me to have such long-term memories. No, we hear that many yogis have retained their self-remembering without undergoing the dramatic changes of life to death and death to life. If a person is just a body, then if the body perishes, his personality also perishes. But if what the prophets have been saying for thousands of years is true, then man is essentially an all-pervading soul without physical form. It may be strange, but it is not uncommon to have vivid childhood memories. While I have been traveling in many countries, I have heard men and women who are true to their faith recount their childhood memories. I was born on January 5, 1893, in Gorakhpur, in northeastern India, near the Himalayan mountains. The first 8 years of my life were spent there. We were 8 siblings, 4 boys and 4 girls. My name was Mukunda Lal Ghosh at that time. I was the second of the boys, the fourth of all. My mother and father were Bengalis. They belonged to the Kshatriya caste. Both were saints by nature. Their love for each other was both peaceful and intense. There was no room for pettiness in that noble love. The peaceful center around which the turbulent lives of our 8 growing children revolved was the wonderful harmony of our parents. When I took ordination in 1915 according to the Sanatan Ashram system, my name became Swami Yogananda. In 1935 my Gurudev bestowed upon me the high traditional title of Paramahamsa, CPP. 281, 484. Father Bhagavati Charan Ghosh was kind, serious, and sometimes strict. We children loved him dearly but were a little reserved with respect. He was a gifted mathematician and logician. He followed his intellect mainly. But my mother was the queen of hearts. She taught us all with love. After she left, my father would show more of the gentleness in him. Then the look he gave me often seemed to be my mother's. To instill discipline, my mother would tell stories from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana suitable for the occasion. On such occasions, both punishment and training would be combined. Thus, in my mother's presence, we, the children, had our first sweet and bitter introduction to the Holy Scriptures. When my father returned from the office, my mother would carefully dress all the children in the evenings to welcome him respectfully. He was a vice president in the Bengal Nagpur Railway, one of the largest companies in India. This meant that he had to travel a lot, Our family moved to many cities during my childhood. My mother was always generous in helping the needy. My father was also generous, but he felt that such expenditure should be within the limits of income. In a fortnight, my mother's expenditure on feeding the poor exceeded my father's monthly income. Then my father said to my mother, "I have only one request of you. See that your expenditure on charity does not exceed the permissible limit." Even my husband's gentle reprimand made my mother sad. Without even telling her children about this difference of opinion, she called a Jatka. Vacation. I am going to my native place. This is the final warning that has been sounded since ancient times. At that word we turned white and started crying. Exactly that. In due time, as if summoned by someone, my uncle came and whispered something in my father's ear. No doubt, this was the advice that many have been giving for ages. After that, my father said 4 words of conciliation. My mother happily turned the cart around and sent it away. As far as I could tell, that was the only argument that my mother and my father had. But I remember one discussion that both of them had, which was natural. "Give me 10 rupees. A poor woman has come and asked for it," she said. My mother's smile had the quality of persuading others. "Why 10 rupees? 1 is enough." Father continued to justify his opinion. "When my father, grandfather, and grandmother died suddenly, I experienced poverty for the first time. Do you know what my lunch was in the morning when I had to walk a few miles to go to school? Just a small banana. Do you know how hard it was to find money when I was studying at the university? I approached a rich judge and asked him to give me a rupee a month. He said no, even a single rupee is important to him. How painful it must be for him to say that he would give me that rupee." Mother's heart immediately used logic. She said that she would give you 10 rupees when you were in a hurry. Do you want to think about it as well? You are the one who won. He showed the gesture that all defeated husbands have always made and opened his wallet. "Here is a 10 rupee note. With my best wishes, she will give it to you." First of all, whenever a new proposal comes up, it is my father's habit to say no. His attitude towards the stranger who had so quickly won my mother's sympathy is an example of his usual caution. Not agreeing immediately when asked is really following the principle of think before you decide. I have noticed that he is always reasonable and balanced in the decisions he makes. He gives reasons for my countless desires and gives 1 or 2 good reasons. If I could justify it with arguments, he would fulfill whatever I asked for, be it a trip on vacation or a new motorcycle. He used to keep his children very disciplined when they were young. In his own case, however, he was a strict austerity. In fact, he never went to plays. He took pleasure in various spiritual practices and the recitation of the Gita. He gave up all luxuries and lived with only 1 pair of old shoes, which he used until they were no longer useful. When the use of motor cars increased among the people, his sons bought them, but he used to go to the office every day in a tram. My father had no interest in accumulating money for power. Once, even though he founded the Calcutta Urban Bank, he refused to take shares in it. He did not want to profit from them. In his spare time, he thought he would die if he could just do his duty as a citizen. Many years after my father retired, an accountant from England came to inspect the books of the Bengal Nagpur Railway. He was surprised to find out that my father was due a bonus from the railways. He had never applied for the bonus he was owed. He did the work of 3 men. The accountant told the company, "The compensation he owes me is Rs. 125,000. The company treasurer sent my father a check for that amount. In his eyes, it was such a small matter that he forgot to tell his family. After a long time, my youngest brother Vishnu saw in the statement sent by the bank that a large amount had been deposited in my father's account and asked my father about it. "Why are you so excited about material gains?" He replied, "A person who thinks of achieving equanimity in everything does not get excited when there is profit and does not get depressed when there is loss. He knows that when a person comes into this world, he comes without money, and when he leaves, he does not take even a single rupee with him." In the early days of their married life, my mother and father lived in Kashi. Lahiri Mahase was the disciple of the great Guru. Naturally, my father's penchant for asceticism was further strengthened by this association. My mother once told my elder sister Rama a great thing: your father and I meet as husband and wife only once a year, for the sake of the children. My father first met Lahiri Mahase through a railway employee named Avinash Babu. Avinash Babu worked on a branch line of the Bengal-Nagpur Railway. During his days in Gorakhpur, thus Avinash Babu used to recite to my little ears the stories of many Indian sages in a way that would touch my mind. While telling the stories, he would always offer johars to the greatness of his guru at the end. Have you ever heard under what strange circumstances your father became a disciple of Lahiri Mahase? It was summer. On a warm afternoon, Avinash Babu and I were sitting in the courtyard of our house. Then he asked a tricky question. I smiled and turned my head as if I didn't know, hoping to hear what he would say. When you were born a few years ago, I asked my superior officer, your father, to grant me a week's leave to go to Kashi and have darshan of my guru. He made fun of me for that. Are you going crazy after getting into religion? He asked. If you want to come up, concentrate on your office work, he advised. Song. That day, as I was walking down the tree-lined path, looking at my house sadly, your father appeared in a palanquin. He sent the servants and the palanquin back and walked with me. In an attempt to console me, he told me the benefits of striving for worldly success. But I continued to feel sad. Lahiri Mahase, I cannot live without seeing you, my heart kept crying out, and that was all. Our path finally reached a peaceful field. There, the evening sun's rays were shining like a crown on the wild grass that had grown like a wave. We stood there, enchanted by the beauty of that magnificent scene. Meanwhile, a few yards away in that field, our Gurudev has appeared. Bhagwati Babu, are you being too strict with your subordinates? He said. His voice echoed in our astonished ears. As strange as he had appeared, he had disappeared as strangely. I knelt down and called out to him in surprise, Lahiri Mahase. Lahiri Mahase. Your father was silent for a few moments. Avinash Babu, I will not only give you leave, I will also give it to myself. We are leaving tomorrow for Kashi. I must definitely know about the great Guru, Lahiri Mahase, who was able to appear here by his willpower to speak on your behalf. I will also ask him to take our ashes and initiate us to follow his spiritual path. Will you take us to his presence? Certainly. I was overwhelmed with joy that my prayer had been answered so wonderfully and that things had quickly turned for the better for me. The next evening, your mother, father and I boarded a cart to go to Kashi. The next day, when we reached there, we rode a horse-drawn cart for some distance, then walked through narrow lanes and reached a secluded house. We entered the small room where the Guru was sitting. As usual, he was sitting firmly in the lotus position. We bowed before him. He blinked his eyes, which were staring at him, and fixed his gaze on your father. Bhagwati Babu, you are very strict with the employees working under you. He said the same thing when he appeared in the pasture 2 days ago. After that, I am very happy that you allowed Avinash Babu to come to my house and that you and your wife have also come with him. His spiritual practice of Kriya Yoga for your parents. The miraculous powers of great yogis are explained in chapter 30, the lore of supernatural events. The yoga practice taught by Lahiri Mahase. With this, the agitation of the senses is calmed and the human being is given the opportunity to practice in such a way that the identity of himself as this universal consciousness is ever increasing. See chapter 263. He instructed and delighted me. Since that memorable day of divine vision, your father and I, fellow disciples, have been close friends. Lahiri Mahase took a deep interest in your birth. Your life must be linked with him. The blessings of the great Guru are never wasted. Lahiri Mahase passed away shortly after I entered this world. A photograph of him was in a beautifully decorated frame in our house. In the towns where my father moved due to office transfers, his photograph would always bring joy to our puja mandir. For many days, morning and evening, my mother and I would sit in meditation near the temporary shrine we had set up. We would worship with flowers dipped in fragrant sandalwood. We would burn incense sticks of frankincense and gugal. We would worship the divinity fully manifested in Lahiri Mahase with united devotion. The impact of his photograph on my life was immense. As I grew older, my perception of that great Guru also grew with me. While I was sitting in meditation, his figure in the photograph, he would often appear to come out of the small frame and take on a living form and sit before me. When I tried to touch his feet, which were shining with a radiant body, it would turn into a doll again. As I passed through childhood and entered into childhood, the image of Lahiri Mahase changed in my mind from a small doll in a frame to an inspiring living form. Whenever I faced any complicated problem or crisis, I would often pray to him. I would notice his guidance that brought relief to me. At first I used to feel sad that he was not living in a physical form. But after I began to realize his mysterious omnipresence, I stopped feeling sad. He would write to his disciples, who were eager to see him, "Why come to see a body full of flesh and blood, when I am always within your range of vision?" When I was 8 years old, I was inspired by a photograph of Lahiri Mahase. I was fortunate enough to recover miraculously. This experience deepened my love. While I was at my family's Ichapur estate in Bengal, I contracted Asiatic cholera. I had given up hope. The doctors could do nothing. My mother, sitting by my bed, motioned me to look at the photo of Lahiri Mahase on the wall above my head. "Give him a stick in your mind." She knew that I was impatient to even lift my hands to give him a stick. "If you really show your devotion to him, if you worship him in your mind, he will look at you coldly," she said. I stared at his photo. There was a dazzling light. It surrounded my body and the room. The feeling of vomiting, along with all the other symptoms that had not been able to be subdued, disappeared. I was cured. I was filled with joy at Amma's boundless faith in the Guru. I immediately felt strong enough to bend down and touch her feet. Amma pressed her head on the small picture again and again. "O omnipresent Guru, I thank you for your radiance that has cured my child." I realized that she had also seen the radiance that had caused me to recover from that normally fatal illness. The most valuable of all my valuable possessions is that photograph. This photograph, given by Lahiri Mahase himself, radiates sacred resonance. There is a wonderful story behind the birth of this photograph. I heard it told by my father's fellow disciple, Kali Kumar Ragaru. Mahase did not like being photographed. Once, despite his objections, he and Kali Kumar Rai and his group of disciples were photographed together. However, after seeing the plate of that photograph, the photographer was surprised. The images of all the disciples came out clearly, but Lahiri Mahase's face was not in the right place. Nothing but emptiness was visible. He spoke at length about this miracle. Gangadhar Baba, a disciple of a skilled photographer, boasted that the form of the Mahases, who disappeared when he was about to take a picture, could not escape his camera. The next morning he brought his camera. Gurudev was sitting on a wooden table, seated on a lotus seat. A curtain was hanging behind him. Then, taking all precautions to fulfill his task, he took 12 photographs in succession. But when he looked at them later, what did he see on each plate? The wooden table, the curtain behind, that is, the form of the Mahases was not finished. Tears welled up in Gangadhar Babu's eyes. His pride was shattered. He ran back to the Guru. Even after many hours, Mahase did not break his silence. Then he made this emotional statement. "I am the form of the soul. Can your camera take a picture of the invisible energy that is all-pervading?" "I know that it cannot. But Swami, I respectfully request a picture of your physical temple. Until now, my vision has been narrow. I have not been able to understand until today that the soul energy is complete within you. But come tomorrow morning, I will take a picture," said the Mahase. The photographer focused again. This time his holy form was clearly visible in the picture, without being hidden by the veil of obscurity. The Mahayogi never took another picture. I have never seen any other picture of him. That photograph is reproduced in this book. See the photo section opposite page 300. See also the portrait of Lahiri Mahase on the next page. In 1935-36, when Paramahansa Yogananda was in India, he asked a Bengali artist to paint this portrait based on the original photograph of Lahiri Mahase. Later, it was confirmed as the portrait of Lahiri Mahase to be used in YSS SRF publications. This is currently. Lahiri Mahase's beautiful appearance does not immediately indicate his ethnicity. The joy of divine communion is slightly expressed in his mysterious smile. His wide eyes show that he has only a nominal interest in the outside world. They are half closed, indicating that he is immersed in inner joy. Many curious people used to come to him for his generosity. He, who did not succumb to worldly occult temptations, was always fully aware of their spiritual problems. Some years after I was cured by the glory of the Guru's image, I had an inspiring spiritual vision. One morning I sat on my side and was lost in dreamy thoughts. What is behind the darkness that remains when my eyes are closed? This thought that penetrated my mind entered my mind. Immediately, a gigantic light like lightning appeared in my inner vision. The divine bodies of the sages sitting in meditation in the mountain caves, and the large light deep below my forehead, took shape like miniature movie figures on the screen. "Who are you?" I asked loudly. "Himalayan yogis," said those divine men. It is difficult to describe their divine answer. My heart was pounding. "I have longed to go to the Himalayas and become like you." The vision disappeared. But those sparkling rays were increasing in circles and circles endlessly. "What is this wonderful light?" "I am God, I am light." The voice was like the murmur of clouds. "I want to merge in you." The painting is in the Gurudev's sitting room at the SRF Center in Los Angeles. Publisher's note. Asterisk, the Sanskrit name for God in the form of the Lord of the universe. It comes from the root, ish, meaning to rule. In the Hindu scriptures, God is called. In the slowly dissolving ecstasy of bliss, the inspiration to seek God was given to me as a permanent legacy. He is the eternal, ever-new form of bliss. Even long after this ecstasy, the memory of it remained with me. There is another childhood memory that I must mention, literally. Because, unfortunately, the scar of it is still on my body today. One morning, my sister Uma and I were sitting under a neem tree in the courtyard of our house in Gorakhpur. Some parrots were eating neem fruits near us. I was staring at them. Whenever I could look away from them, my sister was helping me read a Bengali textbook. Saying that she had a boil on her leg, Uma brought a bottle of ointment. I took a little of the medicine from it and applied it to my forearm. Why should I apply medicine to my good hand? I think I am going to get a boil tomorrow. I am applying your medicine to the place where I am going to get a boil. Oh, you liar. Akka, don't call me a liar, see what happens tomorrow. I felt a pang of nausea. Uma didn't believe me, she repeated the same word 3 times. As I answered slowly, a firm promise sounded in my voice. With all my willpower, tomorrow morning I will get a really big boil right here on my hand. Your boil should be twice as big as it is now. At dawn, a large boil appeared on my hand where I had said, the boil had doubled in size. At that, my sister cried out and said, "There are names. Each of them represents a different visionary half-shadow. By whose will all the worlds are created and destroyed in the established cycles, that is the Lord, the God of the gods." I ran to my mother. Mukunda has become a sorcerer. My mother sternly warned me never to use the power of words to harm. I always remembered her advice and followed it. My boil was cured by an operation. The scar where the doctor had made the incision is still there today. I have a scar on my right hand that reminds me of the power of even a simple word. What I said to Uma were ordinary words, they were harmless. But those words, spoken with deep concentration, had enough mysterious power to explode like bombs, and no matter how harmful they were, to produce certain results. Later I realized that the explosive power of words can be used wisely to remove the difficulties of life and to perform surgery without scarring or insults. Our family moved to Lahore, in Punjab. There I acquired a picture of Goddess Kali. That picture sanctified the small, modest shrine in the balcony of my house. I had a strong belief that whatever I prayed at that sacred place would be granted. One day, I was sitting there with Uma, watching 2 boys flying kites. They were both on the roofs of different houses. There was a very narrow lane between their houses and mine. "Why are you so quiet?" Uma said, playfully pushing me. "No, I was thinking how wonderful it would be for mother to give me whatever I asked for." "I think mother will give you 2 kites too." My sister laughed playfully. The infinite powers of sound emanate from the creative sound Om. This Omkara is the universal vibrational energy behind all atomic energies. Any word spoken with clear understanding and deep concentration has the power to produce results. It has been observed in psychotherapeutic systems such as Kuism that if the words are repeated aloud or silently, they will produce results. The secret lies in increasing the rate of response of the mind. Kali is the symbol of God in the form of the eternal Mother Nature. Why not? I began to pray silently to get them. In India, there are competitions in flying kites. Their strings are coated with glue and glass powder. Each player tries to cut the string held by his competitor. The broken kite floats on the roofs of houses. It is a lot of fun to catch it. Uma and I were there, and since the roof was a balcony like a nest, it seemed impossible for the broken kite to reach our hands. Its string hangs on the roof. The players on the other side of our alley began their competition. One of the strings broke, the kite that was attached to it floated in my direction. Meanwhile, the wind suddenly subsided, and the kite stopped for a moment. At that moment, its string caught on the cobra plant on the roof of the house opposite. With that, a long, beautiful curve was formed for me to hold. I gave my prize to Uma. This is an extraordinary coincidence, but it is not the result of your prayer. If that second wind also reaches you, then I will believe it, your word. As I said this, my sister's dark eyes showed more surprise than her words. I continued my prayer deeply. As I forced myself to do so, the wind of the second player also snapped. My breath began to come, dancing in the air. The snake plant that had helped me at first made the curve form a curve for me to hold. I also gave my second prize to Uma. It's true, Mother Goddess listens to you. All this seems like magic to me, said my sister, running like a frightened lady. Please support us for more videos, like and comment, subscribe.